Come on, we're running late, folks.
To be continued. It's on.
Our next presenter is a former directing business representative of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126. He is highly regarded with a unique understanding of our current monetary system, its penalty to workers and our economy. In an era of debt, austerity, and spiraling income inequality, we can no longer ignore the truth that workers, not plutocrats, are the most important contributors to our economy. Real monetary reform will unleash the creative power of the working class. IAM Local 126 is one of the key union supporters of Kucinich's monetary reform bill, HR 2990. He speaks on our current debt-based money used as medium of exchange versus horses used as transportation, strange but true history and correlations. Please welcome Joseph Pijanowski.
Thank you very much. Let's see, we roll through this so we have some time left over. You have to indulge me a little bit. At first you're going to say, where the heck is he going with this? But I happened across the history of horse transportation back some time ago. I think it was in Freakonomics it was mentioned. And it occurred to me that there's some similarities, and you can always learn something from history. So I have an alternate title. You can't have horses without manure, or versus you can't have woo-on. You know, we say money, and we talk about, and to Stephen's point that he made, what we use as money. Well, we shouldn't call it money because it's not money. So I'm going to call it woo-on, WWUAM, because it's not real money. So far, Local 126, we did pass a resolution in supported an NEAT Act when it was in Congress. I've been to D.C. numerous occasions to lobby for the NEAT Act. I've presented the NEAT Act to the Executive Board of Chicago Federation of Labor a couple of times. I also arranged for Steve Zarlinga to catch up with Richard Trumka, the AFL-CIO. I got nothing to show for it. We still need a way in. You know, we just have to keep trying until we figure it out. So let's talk about this horse manure crisis. Back about 1850, the use of horses just accelerated, really skyrocketed, and that was driven by the railroads in the expanding cities. Well, the cities were expanding because of the railroads. The railroads were bringing large quantities of goods into the station, and they needed horse carriages to bring it from the station and distribute it. So consequently, as the population increased, the horse population increased even faster. So a 1,000-pound horse will produce about 30 pounds of manure every day. So in 1900, the horse population in Chicago was about 83,000, which produced 2.5 million pounds of horse manure every day, plus 200,000 gallons of urine. Every day, every day. By the late 1800s, cities were just drowning in horse manure. So the manure attracted billions of flies. Diseases were being spread. They were very afraid of what was going to come as it got worse. In the summer it dried, it was ground to dust by the horses trampling over it, and it was blown everywhere. It was causing respiratory issues. It was blowing in the houses, and when it rained, you could just imagine what that was like. You got a quagmire out in the street that stinks to high heaven. I work at a water reclamation district. I'm a machinist by trade. I went back to the tools. And I can tell you, it stinks. So I can only imagine what this is like. In fact, there's a little history of Chicago. Some of the brownstones, a lot of the houses have stoops. that's, half a dozen steps up to the first level. Well, this was the reason they did it, because the streets were awash in manure. So that's where that comes from. So another problem was actually horse carcasses. I found a statistic. In 1912, Chicago carted away 10,000 dead carcasses. And what's even worse is they would let them sit there for days to putrefy because they were too hard to cut up when they were fresh. So, yeah, it was really, really a bad situation. Now, the problems with horses wasn't exactly new. Julius Caesar banned horse carts from dawn to dusk in effort to stop the gridlock and noise and accidents and other byproducts of horses. But the conditions in the late 19th century pushed horse manure to new heights. And that's literally, because the manure would be piled, in some cases, 40 to 60 feet high between buildings. And it would always seem to migrate from the rich areas to the poor areas. They always money to get it out of the rich areas, but not all the way out, and they would end up, and that's just, how things were going. So in 1890, this was their equivalent of our climate change, because they could see, they knew that this was a huge problem. Now, being made fully aware of the cause of the manure problem, you couldn't deny it. You've seen the horses, you've seen the manure, you've seen where it came from. You could not deny it. No one could hide from the problem. It was in our face, we were stepping in it, okay? So the government officials, being pestered by the people enough, finally they decided, you know what, this is a crisis. This is really serious. So they actually gathered, and I don't know who organized it, but they gathered municipal engineers, designers, planners from cities all around the world, literally all around the world, because all the big cities had the same exact problem at the same time. And they brought them all together for a 10-day conference in New York. Now, the unfortunate side to that was after 3 days, they said, we got nothing, and they went home. They did. That's not very comforting, okay? So let's talk about some differences and similarities now between our WUM, our debt money, and horses is used for transportation. So you can't have a system powered by horse transportation without manure. And with our money system, you can't have a system of WUM without, as a medium of exchange, without debt. Okay? They're inextricably linked. So continuing to use the horses as transportation, which was just continuing to increase, they knew they were going to end up with a severe health crisis. As today, if we continue down the road and use this debt money, we will cause a severe austerity and a debt crisis. So, some other similarities is it caused a great economic stress on the municipal budgets. The sanitation department picking this stuff up, and this health department trying to stay ahead of disease. And it was going to bankrupt them. They knew this. And here we also have, on the money side, it's causing great economic stress on municipal budgets because the debt is constantly increasing. And they know this. So the system of horsepower local transportation became too costly and unsustainable. Key word, unsustainable, just like climate change, that's the key word. And our current debt-based monetary system, and WUM, is too costly and unsustainable. All right? So the local transportation system was fatally flawed, and everyone knew it. There was no doubt. They knew. But at the time, they had trouble trying to come about a solution. So our monetary system is fatally flawed, and what we use as money, as a medium of exchange, is also fatally flawed. But almost no one knows it. So now we get into a little difference. Another difference is the problem was solved, the manure crisis was solved when the horse was replaced by the automobile. Well, when they had their great conference, automobiles were not in the picture yet. It was too early. But one thing that is different is the automobile could literally replace the horses one at a time. You didn't have to do a system-wide change. You could just do it gradually over time until all the horses were gone. So the problem on the money side can be solved by replacing our current debt-based medium of exchange, WUM, with real money under the NEAT Act. But that must be implemented system-wide nationally. So there's a big difference there. But here's another similarity. When the automobile did appear, those that profited from the old horse system, the breeders, the carriage builders, the feed farmers, the blacksmiths, they all belittled and ridiculed the automobile. Why? Because it threatened their established way of doing business, okay? Even though their way of doing business threatened their own humanity in the city. It's threatened, it was a very serious threat. Well, here we have when we present the NEAT Act to the bankers, they're going to ridicule this and belittle it because it threatens their established way of doing business, even though their way of doing business threatens humanity. Important point. But another difference, people with the manure crisis, people were not afraid to talk about it. They were always, they couldn't help but talk. You step out the door, there it was. So it was constantly on their mind. And they demanded a solution. But there was no apparent solution at the time. Now, those that are in charge of our municipal, county, state, federal budgets are not inclined to talk about our debt problem. And that, I think, is because, to them, there is no solution. If they would talk openly about it, well, they risk a serious crisis, because if they openly admit that the system they're working with and the resources they have, it's unsustainable, they do not have a way out, well, that could be a problem. So I did see that there might be an opportunity. So let's talk about next steps. And here I stole a line from Joe Bongiovanni and his presentation. Serious changes are the result of serious public inquiry. That's a beautiful line. How do we get there? So almost no one knows the problem that we freely acknowledge, almost. So I had the chance to cross paths with various budget directors and treasurers, and I was talking with one at this is a couple of years ago, and I asked them, I said, just between me and you, I says, you're aware of the trends in tax revenue and the cost of services and the infrastructure requirements and the debt and servicing the debt. I says, do you really believe that you can write a sustainable budget year after year and stay ahead of the debt? And he backed up and he just stood there. And I just stood there. And then I says, well, I'll make it easier for you. What if we have another financial event like the one in 2007, 2008? Without hesitation, and he didn't say that. Okay? So that was very telling. And that stuck in my head. So I have a proposal. We've been struggling to find a way in to bring this to the public discussion. And we're beating our heads against the wall. It's not for naught. This is the process we have to go through to get to where we need to be. So I propose a campaign. I'm going to try to put together a campaign based on that question. And what I would seek to do is start just a Facebook campaign. Throw some seed money at it, and real simple, to encourage the public to ask their government officials at all levels if they believe they can write a sustainable budget year after year and stay ahead of the debt. If not, the system is broken and can be fixed. And what are they going to do about it? So we can coin a phrase, if it's broke, let's fix it. Reduce the debt, taxes, financial inequality, and then you will no longer be broke. This is a way to bring something, and I think it's got some possibility because the public loves to expose secrets. They love to expose secrets. And I can tell you, I've had the unfortunate circumstance to be saddled with something like that, where you are aware that you have to maintain something, whatever it is, and you know it's unsustainable, and you know there's no way out. So you cannot talk about it. You cannot talk about it. Talking about it just runs you into the ground instantly. At least this way you could float a while. And that's how I think the situation is for our budget managers at all levels of government. So I think this is a possibility to start a campaign. And I'd ask for your input. What do you think? How can you tune this up? And it's a simple thing. And once you get it started, there's two things that have to happen. One, we have to flush out the problem. So, okay, hey, we have a debt problem, and it needs to be addressed now. But simultaneously, you cannot just do that. You have to show them, well, here's good news. We have a problem, but here's the answer, the NEED Act. And I think there's some real possibility to getting this off. Because if it would start, if it would go, what my plan is to, just like Bernie Sanders, a brilliant, running the Medicare for All campaign. He's running that like a political campaign. And what he's doing on Facebook and little advertisements, he says, here, Medicare for All. Do you agree with us? You click on it, yeah. Well, hey, how about a little donation to keep this thing going? Well, that's what I'm thinking about. So if we get enough donations, it doesn't take much, just to continue the campaign, just to keep pushing the campaign. You get enough, and if we make the tipping point and it keeps going, well, here we go. So anyways, I will open it up. Comments, questions?
We're going to have a panel later.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.